make sure to give my dad a 5-star review.
Make sure to like and subscribe to his YouTube. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Hi there. Welcome to another episode of Faithful Politics. I'm your co-host, Josh Bertram, faithful host. We have, as always, our political host. Hi, Will. It's good to see you.
Heidi ho, Baba Booey.
There you go. And today we have the distinct pleasure to interview Pastor Jeff Mikels. He is an evangelical pastor and author with over 20 years of ministry experience, holding degrees from Wheaton College and Denver Seminary. He served as a pastor in Chicago and later planted a church in Lafayette, Indiana, where he helped establish the Greater Lafayette Gospel Association and served as its president. In his latest book, Evangelical Idolatry, How Pastors Like Me Have Failed the People of God, Mikels reflects on how political and cultural idols have infiltrated evangelicalism, often with the complicity of church leaders. And that's what we're going to interview him about today. And his work encourages pastors and congregants to return to a gospel-centered faith, offering a personal confession and a call for reform in evangelical practices. Jeff, it's great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate the work you guys are doing, and it's an honor to be here.
Yeah, I should probably also say that before we started recording, we realized that Jeff and I share a kindred geographical bond because we're both from the high desert of California. So Apple Valley, right?
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing to meet anyone on the planet who knows Apple Valley, Hesperia, Victorville, that little, Tri-City region, let alone someone who has been there.
Yeah, it is funny.
It is kind of fun. I will tell you the moment that I knew where I came from, because I came from a town that neighbors Apple Valley called Hesperia, when I knew that we made it, because Sublime included us in a list of cities for one of their songs. So like the April 29th, 1992, there was a riot on the street. Now, where were you?
Yes.
There was a long list of cities that he identifies in that song. And one of them was like Hesperia. And I remember I was in high school at the time. We're just like, he said Hesperia,
Hesperia, dude. I didn't even realize he said Hesperia.
It's a word that means beautiful for whatever reason, but it's just a desert. I mean, there is a kind of beauty there, but
I have a friend that's from Victorville, and she calls it the armpit of California. I'm not sure what that means, and I don't mean to offend anyone from Victorville, our listeners. I've never been there. I'm sure it's great.
If Will is from Hesperia and I'm from Apple Valley, then Victorville is the literal armpit of those two, because it's between them.
There you go. That's awesome, man. Well, man, Jeff, it's so great to have you on the program today. I'd love to give you a chance to give our audience a sense of who you are. I read your biography and, tried to make it not too long. But I would love for you to, in your own words, kind of describe who you are and what's brought you to this place where you're writing about books on evangelical idolatry and all these lighthearted subjects. It would be great to hear your story there.
Yeah. Well, as Will knows, I'm from Apple Valley, California, the high desert. My dad is a pastor, so I was raised a PK. We moved out there when I was 3 years old. And so my entire life has just been baked in the church. He was the pastor of First Baptist Apple Valley. And it's something that I mentioned in the book, but one of the things that was part of my growing up experience, something that I hadn't really put things together until kind of more recently, but I went to First Baptist Apple Valley, but literally half a mile away from us, down Nisqually Road, was First Southern Baptist of Apple Valley. And just around the corner, across the street from us, was First Nazarene of Apple Valley. And then, of course, down the road a little bit, there was Second Baptist. But I was always irritated that these other churches had the gall to label themselves first. So, from
there
my
a first
earliest
assembly?
days, there was, but that was in Victorville. We don't talk about that.
There you go. We don't talk about that.
Yeah. So it's kind of like Bruno, we don't talk about Victorville. But the whole notion of churches not being united with each other was sort of kind of in my subconscious from early on. Like, the reason those other churches labeled themselves First Southern Baptist is that they weren't the real thing. They were an extra word. They were Southern. And the First Nazarene Church, it was a different thing. And so I kind of had it baked into my early age that we were part of this church and we were doing it right. And the other churches were somehow doing it wrong. My dad never taught me that. No one ever taught me that. You just experience it by driving past the other churches to go to yours. But when I was in high school, I began to get sort of like this passion for what Jesus prayed for, which was the unity of the church. And so I and a couple friends, we started a youth group that tried to be a youth group for all these churches around us. And we eventually got like 6 different churches represented in this youth group that we were doing. And that was my first taste in kind of understanding what church leadership would be like and what church unity could be like. And that was always kind of my passion. So, I went to Christian schools all growing up. I went to a Christian college, Wheaton College. I went to seminary, Denver Seminary. I became a pastor. But my whole heart was always, can I lead a church that is unifying rather than dividing? So eventually, after 5 years in Chicago, we planted a church in Lafayette with that exact idea. Like, we wanted to start a church that wasn't going to create divisions between us and the other churches, but was going to be kind of a catalyst to pull the other churches together. And so one of the first things I did when we moved to Lafayette is I met other pastors and was trying to say, hey, how can we help you? How can we partner together for the sake of the gospel as we move forward in this? And it was just, kind of like a honeymoon period for about 10 years. We were building good relationships with other churches. We were doing some things where people were coming into our church, and I was happily releasing them to other churches. If some other pastor was better for them, I would tell them so. If some other church provided something for them that was better for them, I would encourage them in that direction. And we might have had 2,000 people pass through our church, but only about 200 ever stayed at any given time, maybe 250 or so, because we were a church that was just simply okay with cooperation. And that was always my heart. But man, when the stuff in 2020 came out, when Donald Trump first rose to, prominence among conservatives, it was very clear that there were some conservatives, some evangelical Christians who were uncomfortable with him and some who were comfortable with him. And I was beginning to get the sense that there's something brewing under the surface. There's some sort of like division, some sort of weird underlying thing. And I couldn't put my finger on it. But I do remember one Sunday, I was preaching a sermon on having good friends. And it just so happened that week in the news, Brett Kavanaugh was being interviewed by the Senate to be the Supreme Court justice. And he was being interviewed, and part of the interview was asking him all kinds of stuff about his past. And he described this one story of, in his educational experience, going to a party and just getting so flat out drunk that he couldn't remember what had happened. And he knew he had his friends with him, but he didn't remember what his friends did and what he did with his friends. And so for that whole thing, he was sort of pleading ignorance. Anyway, I made the point on Sunday that we all need to have better friends. We all need to have good friends, because in those cases that we get ourselves into trouble, we need someone to keep us out of trouble. And I had a family leave the church because I had gotten political. And I was confused. Like, why is it that mentioning a person who's in the public eye who has obviously had a moral failure of some kind or a friend failure of some kind, how is that labeled political? And things just got worse from there. 2020 was the catalyst of all things when it comes to church division. And in Lafayette, I had initiated this group we called the Greater Lafayette Gospel Association. We were a collection of 35 churches, 30, 40, maybe even more churches that were working together. I was the president of the organization. And in February, I passed the torch to another guy. In March, we were told to lock down and not do Sunday morning worship gatherings. And by June, I was completely ostracized from all those other churches because my church followed the lockdowns and all of these other churches didn't. My church encouraged people to wear masks and all these other churches didn't. And so by the end of that summer, we had lost 80% of our people, had only like 20 or 40 people left. And all these other churches that I had been working so hard with for 15 previous years, it was like I was all alone. And it just, that's the narrative of the unsettledness in my heart that caused me to do the introspection that I think led to this book.
Wow. Sadly, that story is like so common. I mean, we've only been doing this show for about 4 years or so. And we've had, I don't know how many pastors, theologians with like a similar testimony. I mean, to be honest, like you should just create like a support group, because I think that there's enough of you folks out there.
We do need a support group.
I kind of wanted to do that. So there was this article that was published. Ruth Graham published this article in the New York Times back in 2022. And it was an article that spoke to my heart about this guy in Alabama or Arkansas. I can't remember. I never get the A names straight. But he was in one of those states and he was pastoring the church that he had grown up in. And it was like his lifelong dream. He was finally achieving his goal of serving Christ the way he was called to serve. And in that context, the church around him became so political, he eventually had to leave. And so this whole article is about how pastors like this are being broken. And so back in 2022, I was like, there needs to be a support group. Where do people turn? And so I was looking for podcasts. I was looking for books. I was looking for Facebook groups and all kinds of stuff. And it was just hard to find guys who were willing to admit that they were in that place while they were still in their ministry, right? Because that's where it's vulnerable. That's where it's dangerous. If people in your congregation feel like you're leaning away from Trump and they are hardcore leaning in, then for whatever reason, that lost pastors a bunch of jobs.
Yeah.
And it just, it broke something.
And it feels existential, for pastors, because their livelihood depends on saying things that people, at least, if it's not that people like it, that they're not too offended by it, that they're going to leave.
Right. Pastors are always walking this tightrope where, scripture, in fact, tells us that in the coming days, there's going to be false teachers who will tell you whatever your itching ears want to hear. So any pastor who knows his stuff knows that in Paul's letters to Timothy, he specifically says, you need to be the kind of guy who's not afraid to tell people the truth. You need to be the kind of guy who's not afraid to, actually just give people what they need to hear, not just what they want to hear. Every pastor who knows his stuff knows that. And so we're always walking that tightrope of trying to offend them just enough to get them to change towards Christ, while not offending them enough to make the board call a special meeting.
That's like a great succinct statement of what the biggest challenge for pastors in terms of preaching. Because, you get guys saying like, oh, well, he speaks his mind, or when you got someone who's just speaking and saying things that might be offensive to some people in the culture, but everyone in your subgroup thinks it's great. That's not really bold. That's not really challenging. That's not really anything. That's just saying what people want to hear. You're
true.
right on the money. You're right on the money.
That's the echo chamber philosophy. That's the silo. That's if I speak to my own crowd, I can say whatever I want about the people in the other groups, and I'll just get even more popular.
So, I mean, I guess once you realize that, oh, wow, like I've got a congregation, I've got a church network that is behaving in a way that, I feel is, I don't know, maybe not biblical is the right description, but like you were surprised that, hey, I've got a bunch of people that are leaving all of a sudden because I'm just looking out for my people, telling them to mask up, and we're going to close our doors because we don't know what COVID is, and we just want to be doing this out of an abundance of caution. So like what do you do next? I mean, how do you handle that? I don't know, that departure. Maybe the fact that you thought you knew your congregants. Yeah. So like, walk me through, like, what did you do?
I spent about 2 weeks lying on the couch while my wife was working from home, just in the fetal position. Like, what in the world has happened around me? So this is the crisis moment for me was the week of George Floyd's murder. So, and by the way, to use the word murder to refer to what happened to George Floyd is, on the one hand, the actual legal determination done by the judges and the juries. That's what they have called it. And yet to label it that in some circles of evangelicalism is to be woke, right? Is to be part and parcel of this society that is overly concerned with the wrong things. But that week when he was killed, and we had one family in our church from an African-American background. It was a mixed race family. The husband in the family is from a Mexican-American heritage, and the wife in the family was Black. And but like, we did not have a lot of ethnic diversity in the church that I led because, one, it's Indiana, but two, it's because I hadn't done a good enough job, and I don't know if any pastor has, of truly creating a multiracial, diverse community of faith. It's one of the biggest challenges we have. But
I will say Josh has, because half of Josh's church is Black. Actually, half of your church are like multiracial.
Yeah, but that's probably a little bit more by accident than it is. I mean, I definitely wanted to be diverse. Like, that was something that I had in my mind and thought that was very important. But I think it's also like just the people that I met and the people. Yeah. But it is hard. I appreciate the encouragement, Will, but it to your point, Jeff, it's very difficult. It's very difficult.
Yeah. I think it's a literal work of God. I think it's a literal work of God's grace whenever people of differing backgrounds come together in unity, which is one of the key reasons why Jesus says, if they're unified, then the world will know that you sent me. But don't get me started preaching. Because that'll happen. But anyway, so there was this one lady in our church. And when George Floyd was killed, there were some marches that were happening in Lafayette. And she was going to participate in one of the marches. And I went downtown to see it. I didn't walk in the march. I had even though I was leading the white pastors group, the Greater Lafayette Gospel Association, I was also a member of the Pastors Alliance, an African-American pastors group in town. And I was just super overjoyed that they were letting me be a part of that. And I was learning so much in that. And so they were participating in the march. This lady in my church was participating in the march. I went down there and I stood on the corner. I didn't walk. I just stood on the corner and I watched. And when this lady turned the corner to come down the road and she saw me, she ran to me, gave me a hug, thanked me for being there, got back into the march, continued around the corner, and then posted to Facebook later that day how thoroughly proud of her pastor she was that I had come. I wasn't even walking. I was just there. And she posted how proud she was. And this other lady in our church wrote a comment on that post that was basically just the harshest, most conservative, stereotypical kind of acrimony you can imagine in response to this lady and the fact that she had participated in this walk. And I was broken by that. And then later that week, when Donald Trump sprayed tear gas in a crowd of people so that he could walk across Lafayette Square and preach a message of justice to a bunch of people while being surrounded by the military, and then fumbling hold a Bible kind of upside down in front of a boarded up church. That was the straw that broke the camel's back for me. And I wrote a script for one of my daily devotionals. I shared it with my wife. I was like, Jen, I've got this thing, but it's about Trump. And she says, don't you dare post it. And I said, okay. So then I spent a day just praying whenever I had a spare moment, and I revised it and I thought through it. And then 24 hours later, she said, Jeff, whatever you think you need to say, go ahead and say it. So I recorded it. I posted it to my YouTube channel. And that very next day was the day that the elders of the church called a special meeting to say, what has happened to our pastor? We didn't sign up for an activist pastor. And I have not seen any of them since that day. And
wow.
So the elders of my church, within 24 hours of me posting that video, were so offended by the fact that I said, vote for whoever you want, but just don't support who Donald Trump is and what he's doing. When I said that, when I released that video, that was their straw. That broke them. And like I said, I haven't heard from them. There was one family that stayed for an extra year before they finally left. And people that I thought I was in relationship with, people that I thought was my family, the church that I had built, that my family had sacrificed so much for, gone, just dissolved. And so, like, the only reason I share that story is that, like you said before, I'm not unique. Other pastors have been through this thing. But the question that was in my mind is this: what happened so that these people thought I was the one who changed? What happened in these people's hearts and minds so that they thought I had become an activist all of a sudden? And to be sure, I had been broken by some of these events, but I didn't believe I had changed at all. I was still opening the Bible, reading the Bible, teaching the Bible, saying what the Bible said. It just so happened that we had a political figure who was violating some very specific things in the Bible. And when I said that out loud about this one particular political figure, that's the thing that broke. And I had to come face to face with this question. If I had been these people's pastor for 15, 16, 17 years in some cases, and they were more willing to pay attention to Fox News than they were to me and the Bible, what had I done wrong in the previous 15, 16, or 17 years? And that's the real heart behind this book. Just like, what in the world was it in me and in my teaching that allowed all these people to go down this road that led to where we were?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an absolutely fascinating and difficult question. You know, on the one hand, I think the same thing, like, what's going on? What have we done that has allowed this to happen, that people are choosing political ideologies over people they've known for years? And then another part of me also thinks this kind of feels like it's a repetitive story in history where people attach themselves to some kind of ideology because of fear or because of some longing that they have to see a different life. A lot of times it's fear. A lot of times it's fear of losing what they thought they had, or what, you know, especially if you can play on that, which, you know, you got to say the left, all you got to say is the left is taking, you know, the morals of our country and absolutely disintegrating them. And if you want to save your country that you've grown up with and loved, then you need to think this way. And that's a powerful and compelling thing because, you know, as evangelicals, with a certain view of the world, conservative view, which I very much have, you can feel like there are certain policies on the left that are disintegrating things that you really cared about and really thought were like part of the moral underpinnings of our country. And then at the same time, starting to get more educated about the ways in which the conservative movement and the right has taken liberties with the Bible and has used it as a tool, even at times of oppression, right? Mm-hmm. And has done things that have really hurt people and doesn't really represent Jesus. You kind of have to start balancing and saying, yeah, there's moral disintegration on both sides of this thing. And it just depends on the kind of morals you're looking at. And I know one of the things you mentioned is that Trump is the symptom and not the disease. Get into that a little bit for us. What do you mean by that? What are the deeper issues within American evangelicalism that the pandemic and the Trump presidency and all of that have kind of exposed?
Yeah, well, you said one of the things that I never really realized before, and that was just how much fear is a motivator. And if you track Trump's rise to prominence in the Republican Party and in America more generally, since he came down that golden escalator, it has been fear. Like that is the primary language. Even though the language is Make America Great Again, Make America Great Again is a smokescreen for or else. Right? That's the thing. It's like Mexicans and rapists are coming up here. We need to build a wall. The left is going to do A, B, C, and D. Your children are going to grow up and be groomed in some way. We have to take control of our schools again. We have to do all this stuff. Fear is like the main motivator of this whole thing. And so then the question is, how is it that people who literally hear the New Testament say repeatedly, do not fear, how is it that the New Testament that says perfect love drives out fear, that we read the Bible that says fear God and him alone? How is it that those people are the ones who are so susceptible to fear-mongering? And it's just a fascinating thing. So I say that Trump is the symptom, not the disease, because there was already something going on inside evangelicalism. And you used another word that I think is accurate, and it's the word conservative. And I find this to be fascinating because I was raised in a conservative Baptist church. And I'm not using the word conservative as an adjective. That's the proper name of the denomination. There was the Northern Baptists, and they split from the Southern Baptists, and the American Baptists were a thing. And then there's all these other church Baptist splits. And one of the splits that happened in the early 20th century was a split about the nature of the Bible. Is it really inerrant or not? And one group that spilled out of that was a group called the Conservative Baptists. And in Denver, Colorado, the Conservative Baptist Seminary was founded, and that's the school I went to. So my dad was in that denomination, I was in that denomination, and it's just like the word conservative is kind of in my blood because I always assumed I understood what it meant, that it meant I understand that the truth is already in the scripture, I just need to get it out. I don't need to layer my own truth on top of it or compare the truth to modern day. The truth is already in it. It's been written. It's in the past. I just need to bring that truth to the future, to the present. That's the highest way of viewing what conservative as a word means. But if you apply that to anything that's not scripture, you've crossed a line into something invalid. If I read the Constitution conservatively, then I'm assuming that the wisdom of the founding fathers was smarter than the wisdom of people today. And I can't make that assumption. Because I'm a conservative Christian from the theological perspective, I can say that Paul knew God better than I do. And so when he writes things, I can trust his words more than I can trust my words. His words are true, my words are suspect to what I ate last night. But I can't say that same thing about the writers of the Constitution. They were not inspired by God. That gospel, that message is not a gospel. It's not a truth. It's not divinely inspired. It's just a document. And that's where conservative evangelicalism gets mixed with conservative political ideology in a way that confuses the two and is one of the ways that we build an idolatry. If you take something that is true and you layer on top of it something that's not true, and you do that enough times, that's an idol. And that's sort of the heart of this book. So Trump just shows up at the top of that thing, that pile of other stuff. That's where he shows up. And he plays on fears, and he plays on this cultural conservatism. He plays on all these other things. And as a result, people just are like, oh my goodness, I have to pledge fealty to this. And if I don't, then I'm voting for killing babies.
You know, I really appreciate you pointing out about the Constitution and the writers compared to sort of like the biblical authors. Because I think one of the things that bothers me the most about this this blending of faith and politics is when people say, you know, this country was founded as a Christian nation. The Constitution was, you know, godly inspired. And, you know, I can't necessarily argue one way or another whether that's true or not. I'm not God, so I don't know. But what I do know is that if we do want to attach, you know, our Christian faith to the Constitution, to the founding of this country, we also have to attach like all the other junk that this country has gone through to Christianity. Like we have to say, oh, the Doctrine and Discovery, like, oh, okay, cool. So God is cool with just like genocide, you know, and all that. And then slavery and segregation and Jim Crow, like God's cool with that because, you know, if this country was founded as a Christian nation and this is part of our heritage or part of our history, then why would God allow all that stuff? You know, so for me personally as a Christian, I'm just like, look, I don't know if God, you know, breathed life into the founders' words and the Constitution and everything. But I feel like the God that I worship is much bigger than, you know, a piece of paper that a bunch of dudes, you know, like to say.
Well, let me give you an inside peek to something that I think is latent in all versions of Christianity, not just evangelicalism. It's definitely present in white American Christianity. It's also present in the Black church. It's present everywhere. It just manifests itself differently in each group. And so in the book, I talk about sort of the white American version of it. But it's, and this is a sneak peek. One of the main things about my book is I don't want to reveal all the idols in the book because I'm afraid if I say the wrong thing, people will turn off too early and they won't give it the time that it needs to percolate before they get to that. But there's one that I think is worth mentioning. And it is an idol that I call blessing. And the way the idol works is that we will say, if there is success somewhere, if God is blessing something, that thing will evidence success. We've all heard it. If God is blessing a church, that's code language for there are more butts in the seats and there are more dollars in the plates, right? That's the code language. Sometimes for some pastors, it's code language for how many people we baptized last week or how many people we baptized last year. For some people, it's how aggressive their pastor is preaching. Man, God is really blessing that church because our pastor's fearless. But the language is that if God is pleased with something, he's going to bless it. And the reason that's dangerous is that in America, we apply that backwards, where we will then say, okay, so if something is being blessed, that must mean that God was in it. And so the people who say that this nation is a Christian nation are doing a reverse thing. What they're saying is that our nation is the most successful nation that has ever been on the planet. We are the most economically successful nation right now. They, of course, ignore the fact that Babylon surpasses us in terms of the GDP of its own day. They ignore the fact that Rome governed almost literally the whole world. But they will still say, you know, the United States is like the most impressive nation. We are so blessed by God. So because we're rich, that means we must be blessed. That means the way things were in the past were the ways that God was pleased with us. And it's the narrative journey of blessing that leads from slavery in the past to the idea that those people back then were doing God's will. Because we have reinterpreted all of this through the lens of blessing. And that only happens if there's a veneer of Christianity. If you remove the veneer of Christianity, then wealth is a symbol of corruption. But if you have the veneer of Christianity, wealth is a symbol of God's blessing. And of course, that is directly against what James teaches in his letter. It's directly against the life Jesus lived. It's directly against everything we read in the New Testament. But because you can find some proof texts in Proverbs and some prophecies in the Old Testament, we apply that backwards, and then we worship it. And so therefore, because we are blessed, because he is blessed, because she is blessed, it must be God at work. And therefore, it must be a good thing. And we bypass all kinds of evil. We justify all kinds of evil because we'll say, but look at the fruit. It doesn't matter if his congregation is a whole bunch of idiots. It doesn't matter if he's a mean pastor. It doesn't matter if that leader is a shambles morally. Look at the fruit. And if there's blessing in the trail, it must be from God. It's a very insidious and dangerous way to view things. And it's one of the reasons why I think, Trump is the symptom, not the disease.
That makes me think about this cultural issue that we're facing in the church, where you have someone who says whatever, like, according to, again, the people in their church, or the conservative culture, they speak the truth, or it's tough love. They just say what needs to be said. They tell the truth. They don't care whether people like it or not, right? No one's going to break the truth. They're going to be broken by the truth. And in a sense, I understand that, because I think it's very, if we're not truth telling as a group of pastors, and if we're not truth telling as Christians, then I don't think we're being light and salt, which is like something we're called to do directly by Jesus. And yet that gets its own, the truth telling, it can be used in a way where it's very offensive. And the whole point is to offend certain people and to please others. Yeah. What do you think is going on with the ideas like truth telling and tough love? How do they contribute to the practice of idolatry in the evangelical church today?
Yeah.
Especially because it's, everyone's going to say we should tell the truth. I mean, you would hope that, right? And you would hope that pastors would be committed to the truth. So it's a very ambiguous thing and a very shaky ground, because no one wants to be accused of like, oh, I don't really care about telling the truth.
Right. Thanks for asking that, because first of all, I think you phrased it exactly the way it needed to be phrased for this reason. The phrase truth telling presupposes a couple things that are part of what's wrong with evangelicalism. It presupposes a couple things. One of them is related to salt and light. One of them is related to truth telling as a discipline, or as a thing. Like, we need to be the people who tell the truth. There are three things I want to say about that. The first one is that we are hypocritical when it comes to speaking the truth. Because if you have paid attention to anything in the last 5 years, Evangelical Christians have not been speaking the truth when it comes to conspiracy theories, when it comes to misinformation on online platforms, when it comes to racism in this country. We have not been speaking the truth over a number of things. We've been keeping silent about those things. And so to be a truth teller, but only to tell one side of the truth or one portion of the truth, is not being a truth teller. That's being a person who's pandering to an audience because of the benefits that it brings to you. So that's the first thing I'll say. We've been hypocritical when it comes to truth telling. The second thing I'll say when it comes to truth telling is that if you pay attention to the actual passages of the Bible that talk about speaking truth, they are Christians talking to Christians. And that is insanely important. When Paul is writing to the churches and he says, speak the truth in love so that everyone can be built up and become what they've been called to be, he is talking to Christians about the way they should be talking to Christians. There's never a moment where in any part of Scripture we are told we are supposed to speak truth to the world. That's not a thing that shows up in the New Testament. And so the third thing is your illustration of salt and light. That's the place where we inject the idea of speaking truth into the world. But that's not what Jesus said. Jesus didn't say, therefore, shine your light before people so they will know the truth. He doesn't say that. He doesn't say, shine your light before people so they will be shamed in their sin. He doesn't say that. One of the modern ideas we have about salt and light, and this shows up in my book twice because it's kind of a soapbox of mine. But one of the things that we say about salt and light is that salt is a preservative. It prevents rot, and light shines on the darkness. And so light is a thing that reveals the darkness and exposes it to the light. That's a biblical metaphor. It is in the Bible, exposing the darkness to the light. It is a biblical metaphor. Avoiding corruption is a biblical truth. It is a biblical metaphor. But what we do is we take these two truths and we inject them into what Jesus said, ignoring the next thing he said. He said, let your light so shine before men so that they will see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. The light, according to Jesus' own words, is seen, not heard. And it is seen in the good deeds of the followers of Jesus. And the end result is when people see a Christian doing the things that Jesus did, they might not believe, they might not have learned the truth, but they will say, wow, their God is good. And that's the thing. We have this idea of salt and light because we live in a society that understands germs and spotlights. And Jesus' society knew neither. He wanted them to be tasty, and he wanted them to be illuminating.
You know, I want to get back to the topic of idolatry again, which, excuse me, I thought it was kind of brilliant that, you know, even though your book is called Evangelical Idolatry, you don't really kind of like approach the subject until like chapter 11 or much later in the book, which is probably a smart move. You know, you start the chapter by sort of laying the foundation, you know, kind of toiling the soil before you start planting seeds. But you know, a lot of our conversation right now has revolved around, you know, Trump and kind of the evangelicals' support for him. But I know that there is sort of a rise in progressive Christianity, if you will, and I hate to even use that term because I feel like Christianity should just be Christianity, shouldn't be, you know, conservative or progressive. It should just be, hey, we're people that like and worship Jesus. And yeah, we may be quirky and have our differences, but we're not going to sort of preface our faith with a political party or whatever. But so I'd love for you just to maybe kind of touch on, you know, what are some elements of the progressive side of people of faith, you know, that can be, you know, identified as idolatrous.
So one of the things that's interesting is that we for whatever reason, have chosen to use the same terminology that the world around us uses, like conservative and progressive. And that's unfortunate, because the conservative mentality says there's some truth that is above us, beyond us, behind us. It has always been there. It's not our job to invent the truth. It is our job to understand the truth and live under it. The progressive mentality says we live in a world that is constantly changing. And since it's constantly changing, we have the opportunity to influence it in ways that change it for the good, for the better. Why can't both be true? The universal truth that God created the world and that Jesus declares, my God and my Father is still working even to this day. Can't those both be true? Can it be true that God has done a thing in the past and he's still doing a thing in the future and even right now? So here's where idolatry shows up in a progressive context. And I don't analyze it in the book because that's not my context. And so I'm not complicit in that part of the thing. I'm not complicit in the idolatry of the progressive world. And so I don't address it. It's not up to me to levy those accusations. But this is a podcast and you asked the question, and so I'll at least give a small opinion, which is the downside of progressiveness is the same downside as conservatism. The downside is it's up to me. That's the idolatry. When a person says it's up to me or it's up to us, we must do this thing because our God isn't moving fast enough. That is the danger of both sides. Anytime we say, Jesus isn't actually the king. He left, and now it's our turn. And so we got to do the best we can do with the stuff around us, and let's just, do the best. And some of us are worried about bringing the past and bringing it back to the present. We want to make things great again. And others of us are like, no. Our greatness is in the future. We need to continually move towards that greatness. Both of them have the tendency of idolizing us, that it's up to us.
Yeah. Is there I don't know, a conflict there though, where, we want to kind of, be active in our civic process. We want to, vote for issues that are important to us. We want to try to get other people to vote the way we do because the thing that we believe in, we want other people to kind of support. Is that sort of like political activism that I just described kind of in conflict to, God isn't moving fast enough for us?
So one of the things I try to do in the book is that in order to get us to a place where tearing down the idols is beneficial, we have to come up with some sort of strategy for what we're going to do after they're done, what we're going to do after they've been torn down, and how we know which things are idols and which things aren't. And so the major central portion of the book is to try to develop a concept that I'm calling proper Christian activism. And it is basically fundamentally coming down to sort of an understanding of a few basic things. First, what is the gospel actually? Is it a doctrine to believe, or is it a thing to enter into and walk with? The Black church has for many years kind of agreed with sort of the Catholic mentality that the gospel is a thing that you enter and participate in. And the evangelical church has, for the most part, in the last 100 years or so, maybe even a little longer, has taken the approach that the gospel is a thing you understand. And that's basically how it ends. There's activism that flows through it, but the activism has been very corrupted by the things that we're already interested in anyway. And what I think we need to do is we have to start with a better understanding of the gospel. It is a thing to believe and it is a way to live. It's both. It is a mention of the kingdom of God that is here now and still on its way. That's understanding the gospel. The second thing is understanding what Christian values really should be. And then the third thing is understanding how those Christian values relate to the world. Because our activism doesn't make sense unless we actually do the work of translating Christian values to a non-Christian world. And I just make the assertion in the book that there is a non-Christian world, And we don't need to make that entire world Christian before we can work in it. There are translational values that are given to Christians that Christians have as a unique value that we can translate to the world. I'll give you one quick example. Jesus says, "Let the little children come to me." It's a Christian value to welcome the poor, the impoverished, the downtrodden, and the oppressed. That's a Christian value. That's not a world's value. For whatever reason, some people in the world have adopted it. They understand it's a principle that's great, because guess what? Jesus is awesome, and the world has realized that some of the things he said are awesome. That's a value that translates equally well to the world from the Christian perspective. But the world doesn't know why. We know why. These people are made in the image of God. That's why they're valuable. And so when we translate the value to the world around us, we can say there's dignity and value in literally every single human being, without qualification and without question. That is a Christian value that translates to the world because it was put in us by God himself, the image of God that's in us. That's a value that translates. And there are a couple others, but it's in the difficult work of understanding which values translate that until we do that, we can't be activists in this world. But I think we should be activists in this world for the values that translate.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I have a question about, you have these two views of truth. You kind of mentioned it before, right? You have this progressive idea that things change, which is certainly true. And cultures change, things are shifting, technology moves forward, and there has to be, a reevaluation of beliefs and of doctrine and certainly of any dogma that, in light of new information, in light of what we're learning about the world, you don't want to have the science of, first century Palestine. No one wants that, right? So most Christians are very willing to accept the scientific advancements in truth of our modern age in terms of medical advancements, which they wouldn't want the same, the Palestinian way in terms of first century Palestine. But the point I'm kind of getting at is that, you have these different views, and you have the conservative side that wants to conserve things. I mean, right? There's certain things that need to be conserved, and we shouldn't be quick to change. We should be slow, understanding the wisdom kind of built into experience over generations, right? Because each generation just experiences life in its own, built on previous generations, but sometimes the wisdom doesn't necessarily translate from experience. It's kind of like they receive this wisdom, but they didn't have the experience that teaches them why this wisdom is so important, right? Yeah. So that's, and I think that's wise. I think we should pay attention to the past, not only the issues that the past has had, but also the ways in which they've conserved and what they chose to conserve. Is there any wisdom that's embedded into that you can look at and say, hey, that makes sense. That's why it's been conserved. People have tried this before and it hasn't worked. So let's learn from the past. The whole idea of learning from the history, or you're doomed to repeat it. My question is in terms of method, because you have these two different ways of viewing Christianity, and you made the point that we should be able to do both. And I agree. My question is, for you, have you discovered anything about the method, the way that people go about coming to the conclusions that they've made about our culture, about the scripture? How can we, because it would seem like method might be one of those things, the ways in which we come to the truth might be one of those things that could be universal. It might be one of those things that we could look at and say, hey, that makes sense that is a step in the algorithm, so to speak. This step doesn't make sense. That's going to create errors in the code, right? We need to debug that part. We need to keep that part. We need to adjust that part. And I don't hear that talked about a lot. We hear a lot of conclusions. And I know when you start talking about method, you can just go around in circles sometimes and you can never get to actual conclusions. That's probably part of the frustration of even the conversation. But what do you think? What kinds of methodological considerations are there for how a conservative and a liberal can come at the truth together and figure out some kind of, path forward?
So there's literally a heading in the book that says Christians need to be comfortable with the methods of truth. And
boom, that'll preach.
Yeah, boom. So there you go. I'm trying to address it. And there's one section. It's not a large section, but there's one section in the book that tries to address that exact thing. There's this story that goes, two people are walking in a field, and one's a conservative and one's a liberal. And they come across a fence. It's in the middle of a field. It's just by itself. There's nothing around it. It doesn't extend to the horizon. It's just there in the middle of the field. And the conservative says, I wonder why this fence is here. I wonder why this fence was put here. I wonder who put it here, how it got here. The conservative is asking historical and meaning questions. And the liberal is like, man, we got to push this thing down. It's an eyesore. It's in my way. I want to keep going forward. And it's just this thing is in my way. Okay. So that's the stereotype. And the stereotype in this context makes it seem like the conservative is the one who cares about truth. The difference is that the liberal, the progressive, or however you refer to him, is cared about the truth on the other side of the fence. The liberal is trying to get to the other side of the fence because there's truth over there too. And so the conservative is like, I don't want to go around the fence or step over the fence. I want to find out the fence. The fence has become my new interest thing. And the progressive says, the fence was never my interest. I was always trying to go over there. That's my interest. And so methods are one thing, but we have to be willing to understand that different people have different goals. Different people have different aims. And so, for example, if I'm asking a question to a philosopher who's part of the continental philosophy tradition, and I have a question and I ask it to another person who's part of the sort of phenomenology philosophy tradition. These are two philosophical traditions. The phenomenology people are the people who are like, let's just think about the way things are. And then the continental philosophers, the continental philosophers are often in that phenomenology. And then there's the analytical philosophers who are into let's identify the rules. What are all the rules that get us to where we need to go? If you ask the same question to both of these guys, you're going to get a completely different answer because their goals are different. Which one is true? Yes. Like, that's the thing. You have to understand that it's not that truth has changed. It's that people are different and they're looking for different things. And so you have to ask the question differently. So now let's talk about some practical methods. So there's the scientific method that a lot of Christians don't understand. A lot of Christians, their limit of the scientific method is two things. One, they had a science fair project when they were in middle school. And that's their notion of what a hypothesis and what a theory is. And they know they did a poor job, and yet their teacher still called it a theory. And then those Christians grew up and they went to some church where some pastor told them that evolution, by the way, did you know, is just a theory. And then those Christians are like, oh, wow, so it's Darwin's science fair project. And for whatever reason, all these corrupt people in the world around me have adopted it. And they've just, sold out to it because it's the only non-God option out there. That's what Christians have been taught. They don't understand that there are some people who have invested 60, 70 years of their life in studying one particular kind of fossil and how that fossil has given tiny little bits of information. And thousands on thousands on thousands of scientists doing thousands on thousands on thousands of different things have all converged into this understanding that the earth is old and there's a gradual change process between the two. I, as a Christian, can say, I know there's a God who can snap his fingers and make light happen, so I can believe there's a God who can nudge a fish to get some legs, right? I have no problem believing that God is powerful enough to do such a thing. And so therefore, I have no problem with the methods of science and the way they discover truth. Same with journalism, same with philosophy, same with art. There are methods in each of these disciplines to understand truth. Our problem as Christians is we think our method is the only method. We think our method is open the Bible, poke a finger down in the little text that's there, and whatever you find, that's the truth. And whatever you're feeling at that moment, Christians are more susceptible to the non-absolute truthness of things than anyone else. Because you can talk to any Christian who did a devotional this morning, and they will tell you the meaning they got out of the text, whether it was actually ever written in that text or not. Because we Christians just simply believe that any thought that comes into our head must have come from the Holy Spirit, and therefore it must be true. And that's not a good method of truth.
That's pretty deep. And I was thinking, if you're into comedians, Pete Holmes, one of my favorite comedians, he did this like skit about like people believing in God and people not believing in God. And then I'm going to butcher it. But essentially he was like, yeah, you got on one side, you got a bunch of people that, believe in this God, something you can't like measure, study, like see. And then you've got this other side where they're like, there's nothingness after you die, which is something you can't study, measure, or see. He's like, I don't really know which one's right, but he's like, but you want to know where, what did he say? He's like, but do you want to know where you'll find absolutely nothing? He's like, is on the side that doesn't believe in God because there's nothing. There's nothing. Like he's like, so you can either choose to go to nothing, or you can choose to go to something that might be nothing, but we know for sure that the nothing is nothing. But the something could be something.
Yeah. And it's weird that we Christians have been taught, and this is part of the problem that pastors, part of the things we're guilty of. We've been taught about ways of understanding truth that are just not helpful. They're not thorough, not valid, not important in other areas. And so it's rare that you'll even find a pastor teaching his congregation how to interpret the text of Scripture. But there are a lot of pastors who will just say, this is what I got out of it, and this is what you need to get out of it. And, so we aren't very rigorous when it comes to truth. And that's one of the reasons why in our modern world, Christians are the ones who, and this is scientifically researched fact, okay? Christians are more susceptible to conspiracy theories and other forms of things that plague on gullible people than anyone else. And that's not even just modern research. Paul said it himself. Paul was like, there are gullible people and they will fall for anything. So you, Timothy, keep your head in all things. This is not a new problem of Christians. And yet Paul said, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, if anything is admirable or lovely or excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. And he doesn't say you're only allowed to think about those things if they came from the Bible. There's a lot of truth. There's a lot of admirability. There's a lot of good stuff and good things that are in this world because it's how God made it. And we just need to be the people who are willing to do the work to understand it.
That's right. Three conspiracy theorists walk into a bar. Coincidence? Anyway. I've got this pretty phenomenal book. Where can people find it, follow you, go to your church, all that other kind of fun stuff?
So my name is Jeff Mikels. The last name is spelled like the word Mike, M-I-K-E, with an L-S attached on the end. And if you type Jeff Mikels into any one of the platforms, Google, Facebook, any social media, that's just me. I'm on YouTube. I'm on all these other places. I do a podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts called Jesus First. But again, if you search Jeff Mikels, there are not a lot of people who spell their last name my way. And so it's fairly easy to be high on the Google search list. And so that's there. If you want to get the book, it's in pre-order right now. Last week, it was not available for pre-order. For some reason, Amazon, it was like pre-order, and then they ran out of pre-orders or something. And for like a day, the book ranked number 1 on creationism. I don't know why, but whatever. It's now back available. If you go to Erdmans, EERDMANS, if you go to erdmans.com or search them on Google, that's the publisher. And they have links to bookshop.org, Barnes & Noble, and Amazon. But you can search for Jeff Mikels, and the book is called Evangelical Idolatry. And I'm amazed you held it up there because I haven't seen a physical copy yet. They haven't sent one to me yet. Oh, there you go.
There it is, man. for your eyes. Behold.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Jeff. This has been phenomenal conversation. We just love talking to you. And we wish you nothing but the best and hope that our audience will go out and pre-order it, because that's kind of where the money's at, right? Like in the pre-order. So we want to make sure that we keep Jeff at the number 1 under creation. So
yes, creationism.
There's like half a chapter where I talk about the origins of young earth creationism and how it's associated with some things that we really don't want to be associated with as Christians, but that's for those people who actually can read the book.
That's also well. Thanks again, Jeff, for everything. Like I said, this has been a great show. Jeff Mikels, pick up the book Evangelical Idolatry. We'll make sure we put links in the comments and the notes, and to our listeners and audience. Yeah, thanks again for joining us, and keep your conversations not right or left, but up. And we'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye. Hey there, Josh Bertram here, faithful host of the Faithful Politics Podcast. I want to let you know about a compelling new spinoff, the Faith Roundtable, where I'll be interviewing top faith leaders, theologians, and scholars to unpack the pressing issues that are shaping the church in America today. We'll dive into topics like faith in public life, social justice, and how we can engage our communities more effectively. Make sure you don't miss any of our enlightening conversations by subscribing to it on our YouTube channel. Join me at the Faith Roundtable, where deep discussion meets thoughtful insight.